Today, you'll find out why the people who feel the most guilt after losing someone are actually the ones who did the most right, and why your brain is lying to you about your failures. You might think this is just about letting go, but it's not. This is about understanding why your most loving moments can become your biggest regrets, and how the medical system failed to prepare families for what really happens. Sarah, a 47-year-old marketing manager, was balancing work, family, and visiting her stroke recovery father. Some days she made it to the facility, some days she didn't. The morning she finally took a day for herself, her phone rang with news that would destroy her. Millions of caregivers are destroying themselves with guilt that has nothing to do with reality. It's your brain's survival mechanism gone wrong, and it's killing people from the inside out. This is Health SOS. I'm Dr. Ellis Grant, family medicine physician for 30 years. I've watched families tear themselves apart over medical decisions they should never have faced alone. Sarah's about to tell you how love became her greatest enemy, and why your guilt is proof of how much you cared. Sarah, let me start with a question that's been haunting you. Should I have visited him more? That question has eaten Sarah alive for a year now. That's what happens when ordinary love gets twisted into extraordinary guilt. When does that question hit you hardest?
Everywhere. Brushing my teeth, I think I should have gone Tuesday instead of staying home for laundry. Having dinner with my family, I remember choosing to stay home instead of driving to the facility. Sitting in traffic, I think Dad was probably alone right now, wondering where I was.
You worked full-time, had your own family, but still visited when you could. Tell me about your schedule.
I tried going after work 3-4 times a week. Get there around 6:30, stay until visiting hours ended. Weekends, I'd spend a few hours there, but life happens. My daughter had soccer games. Mark needed help with house projects. Sometimes I was exhausted and needed a day to myself.
That sounds like a normal person balancing an impossible situation.
That's the problem. I was being normal when I should have been extraordinary. He was dying, and I worried about soccer games and laundry. What kind of daughter does that make me?
Listen to what Sarah just said. She's calling herself a bad daughter because she had a life outside her father's illness. Because she couldn't stop being a wife, mother, employee, human being with normal needs. This is where guilt becomes dangerous.
So many days I just didn't go. Tuesday, I was too tired from work. Thursday, my daughter needed homework help. Saturday, I'd tell myself, I'll go this afternoon. Then afternoon became evening. Then I figured visiting hours were almost over anyway. I'd say I'll make it up tomorrow, but tomorrow I'd have another excuse.
What did you tell yourself about those missed days?
That I was terrible, that he was sitting there wondering why I abandoned him, that he probably told nurses his daughter didn't care anymore. And the worst part? Sometimes I was relieved when I didn't go. Visiting him was hard, seeing him confused, frustrated, not really the dad I knew. It was exhausting.
You felt relieved when you didn't visit. Tell me more.
It makes me sound horrible, but yes, sometimes it was easier to stay home. Watch TV with my husband, help my daughter with normal teenage problems, pretend for a few hours that my dad wasn't slowly disappearing in that place.
When you did visit, what was that like?
I tried to make it count. Brought him things from home, photos, his favorite magazine, sometimes food even though he could barely eat it. We'd talk about family memories, or I'd read to him. But even then, part of me was watching the clock, thinking about the drive home, work the next day.
Here's what people need to understand about stroke recovery. After a massive stroke like Bob had, the person you knew is already gone in many ways. Brain damage doesn't just affect movement or speech. It affects personality, memory, the essence of who they were. Sarah wasn't visiting her father. She was visiting his physical shell while grieving the man who raised her.
Exactly. I'd look at him and think, where did my dad go? This man looked like him, but wasn't him. He'd get angry over nothing, forget conversations we just had, sometimes not recognize me. It was like watching a stranger wear my father's face.
So when you chose to stay home some nights, you weren't avoiding your father. You were avoiding the grief of watching him disappear piece by piece.
But I should have been stronger. I should have put his needs first. Instead, I put my comfort first, my convenience first. Now he's gone, and I can't get those missed visits back.
What if the guilt you're feeling, this crushing sense of not enough, has nothing to do with how much you visited and everything to do with how much you loved him?
You don't understand. I failed him when he needed me most.
That's exactly why we need to talk about what really happened. Sarah, you weren't just dealing with your father's stroke. You were thrown into a medical system that expects families to be superhuman without any training or support. If you've ever felt like Sarah, like you're not doing enough, even when you're doing everything you can, stay with us. We're about to uncover why guilt and love get so tangled up and why the system fails the people who care the most. Make sure you're following Health SOS because these are the conversations that could change everything. So you're balancing work, family, and visiting your father. Then you have to navigate the medical system. Tell me about your first encounter with how complicated this became.
Nobody prepares you for how lost you'll feel. The first week after Dad's stroke, I thought the professionals would handle everything. But then they started using terms I didn't understand, asking me to make decisions about things I'd never heard of.
What kind of decisions?
Do you want aggressive interventions if his condition deteriorates? I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm a marketing manager, not a doctor. But they'd hand me forms and say, sign here, like I should just know.
We take traumatized family members and expect them to become instant medical experts. Sarah had no training, but suddenly she's making life and death decisions about treatments she doesn't understand.
The worst part was getting information. I'd ask to speak with Dad's doctor, and they'd say, he'll be by sometime today. I'd wait for hours, Miss Work. And then he'd show up for 3 minutes, speak in medical jargon, and leave before I could ask real questions.
What were your real questions?
Simple things. Is he getting better? Will he walk again? Can he come home? When I'd ask, I'd get vague answers like, we're monitoring his progress, or it's too early to tell. That's not helpful when you're trying to figure out if you should quit your job.
Then came the terminology confusion that destroys families.
They kept talking about end-of-life care, and I thought that meant hospice, morphine, comfort care. But then they're like, no, this is just supportive care, not hospice. What's the difference? When I asked about pain management, they said that wasn't part of the program.
End-of-life care in many facilities is just basic daily care when recovery isn't expected. It's not hospice care, which focuses on comfort and pain management. Families think their loved one is getting compassionate support, but really they're getting minimal maintenance care.
Meanwhile, Dad's developing this cough. I kept mentioning it to nurses, but they'd say that's normal after a stroke. Normal how? Normal meaning it'll go away, or normal meaning this is just how things are now.
What did your instincts tell you?
That something was wrong, but when I'd push for answers, they'd make me feel dramatic. Trust the process. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was a scared daughter watching her father struggle to breathe.
Families get caught in an impossible position. Sarah's instincts are telling her something's wrong, but when she advocates, she's treated like she's interfering. When she steps back and trusts the process, she feels like she's abandoning him.
Exactly. If I asked too many questions, they thought I was difficult. If I didn't ask questions, I wasn't fighting hard enough for him. I couldn't win.
Then came the social worker's advice that changed everything.
She seemed nice. She could see I was stressed, running myself ragged. She said, Sarah, you need to take care of yourself too. Your father wouldn't want you to burn out. Maybe take a day for yourself. It sounded like permission to be human.
What she didn't tell you was that with respiratory issues, things can change rapidly.
Right? She made it sound like self-care was responsible. Nobody said, but be aware your father's condition could deteriorate quickly. Nobody explained that the cough I was worried about could become dangerous overnight.
Pneumonia and respiratory failure are leading causes of death after stroke. That normal cough Sarah was concerned about? It could have been aspiration pneumonia developing, but instead of educating the family about warning signs, they dismissed her concerns and advised her to step back.
So I listened. For the first time in months, I thought maybe I can have one normal evening. My daughter wanted to watch a movie. Mark was making dinner. It felt peaceful, like maybe I could balance this after all.
And that's when your phone rang.
7:30 p.m. On a Tuesday, we were halfway through the movie. The facility called. Sarah, you need to come in. Your father has passed away.
What went through your mind?
That I killed him. That if I had been there, this wouldn't have happened. That the one time I listened to advice about taking care of myself, my father died alone. The guilt was immediate and crushing.
But respiratory complications after stroke often happen suddenly, regardless of who's in the room. The system failed you by not preparing you for this possibility, by not explaining the real risks, and by giving you advice to step back without context.
All I knew was that I wasn't there, and now I'll never be there for him again.
What happened to your father that night wasn't random, and it wasn't because you weren't there. There were medical warning signs that should have been caught, and conversations about his prognosis that should have happened but didn't. Sarah, take me back to that drive to the facility. What was going through your mind?
I kept thinking, this isn't real, this is a mistake. I was driving way too fast, running red lights, calling Mark, crying so hard he couldn't understand me. I kept thinking if I could just get there fast enough, somehow I could fix this.
What did you find when you arrived?
Nothing. He was already gone. They had moved him to some back room, and there was just this empty wheelchair in his usual spot by the window. That's what broke me, seeing his empty wheelchair, because I realized that's where he died, alone sitting in that chair, probably wondering where I was.
Tell me what the staff told you about what happened.
They said his breathing became labored around 6 p.m. By 7 p.m., he was struggling. They called for a nurse, but by the time she got there, he had already passed. Peaceful, they said. He didn't suffer. But how do they know?
What they described, labored breathing around 6 p.m., struggling by 7 p.m., this suggests aspiration pneumonia, which can progress very rapidly. Your father likely wasn't conscious during the worst of it, but nobody explained this to you at the time.
No, they didn't explain anything. They just kept saying, I'm sorry for your loss, and asking me about funeral arrangements, like we were closing a business transaction.
What else did they tell you about his final hours?
One of the nurses mentioned that earlier that day, Dad had been talking about me. She said he told her, my daughter Sarah is the best thing I ever did. She's so good to me, always bringing me things, always checking on me. And that just destroyed me, because here he was bragging about me to the nurses, and I wasn't even there when he needed me most.
Why did that particular detail hit you so hard?
Because it meant he wasn't angry at me for not visiting enough. He was proud of me. He was telling people I was a good daughter, and all this time I've been tearing myself apart thinking I failed him when he was actually proud of the job I was doing.
But instead of that bringing you comfort, it made the guilt worse.
So much worse. Because if he thought I was such a good daughter, then what kind of good daughter abandons their father on the day he dies? What kind of good daughter chooses a movie night over being with their dying father?
Sarah, you didn't know he was dying that day. Nobody told you this was a possibility.
But I should have known. I should have trusted my instincts about that cough. I should have insisted they take it seriously. I should have been there every single day until the end, not taking breaks because some social worker told me to practice self-care.
If you had been there that evening, what do you think would have happened differently?
Maybe I would have noticed his breathing getting worse earlier. Maybe I would have called for help sooner. Maybe I would have held his hand so he didn't die alone. Maybe he would have fought harder if he knew I was there.
And maybe you would have watched your father suffocate right in front of you. Maybe you would have been traumatized by seeing him struggle for air. Maybe you would have screamed for help that couldn't come fast enough. Sarah, what happened to your father was a medical emergency that would have been devastating whether you were there or not.
But at least he wouldn't have died alone.
Many patients die when their loved ones step away, not because the loved ones aren't there, but because the patients finally feel permission to let go. Your father may have been holding on for you, and your absence that night may have been his signal that it was okay to stop fighting.
You're saying he chose to die when I wasn't there?
I'm saying your father spent his last day bragging about what a good daughter you were. He died knowing he was loved. Whether you were physically in that room or not doesn't change the fact that he felt cared for by you.
But I'll never know what his last thoughts were. I'll never know if he was scared, or if he called for me, or if he wondered why I didn't come that day.
What you do know is that his second to last thoughts were about how proud he was of you. That's what he chose to share with the nurses, not complaints about your absence, not requests for you to visit more. Pride in you.
Then why do I feel like I murdered him?
Because you loved him, and because our healthcare system completely failed to prepare you for what loving someone through a terminal illness actually looks like. They gave you impossible choices without information, dismissed your concerns, and then blamed you for taking care of yourself.
The beer. I keep thinking about the beer I never gave him. He asked for one beer, just one, and I said no because he was on medications and I thought he might get better. But he was never going to get better, was he?
Probably not. But Sarah, you are holding on to hope. That's not a character flaw. That's love trying to keep someone alive.
Hope that killed his last chance for a simple pleasure.
Hope that showed him his daughter believed in his recovery. Do you think he would rather have had that beer or know that his daughter never gave up on him?
I don't know anymore. I don't know anything anymore.
What you know is that you loved your father imperfectly, but completely. And that imperfect love is exactly what he was bragging about to the nurses on his last day. Sarah, it's been a year since your father passed. Tell me what this year has looked like for you.
Honestly, it's been hell. I wake up every morning with this weight in my chest, like someone's sitting on me. The first thought I have every day is, Dad's dead and it's my fault. Before I even brush my teeth, I'm already drowning in guilt.
Walk me through a typical day with this guilt.
I'll be making coffee and think, I should have brought him better coffee when he was alive. I'll be helping my daughter with homework and think, I chose helping her over being with him that last night. I'll be at work in a meeting and suddenly remember his face when I'd leave the facility, how disappointed he looked. It never stops.
What about sleep?
What sleep? I lie awake replaying every conversation, every visit, every day I didn't go. I calculate how many hours I spent with him versus how many hours I spent on everything else. The math always makes me look terrible.
You're keeping a running tally of your perceived failures.
Constantly. Should have visited more, should have pushed harder for better medical care, should have moved him to a different facility, should have quit my job to be with him full time, should have given him that damn beer. The list goes on and on.
Sarah, in all these should-haves, I notice you never say, I should have worked less hard to balance an impossible situation. You never say, I should have been less caring. Why is that?
Because caring wasn't the problem. Not caring enough was the problem.
But what if the guilt you're experiencing, this constant self-punishment, is actually your brain's way of proving to itself that you care deeply?
That doesn't make sense.
Think about it. If you truly didn't care about your father, would you be torturing yourself like this? Would you lose sleep over a beer you didn't give someone you didn't love? Guilt this intense doesn't come from indifference, Sarah. It comes from the opposite.
But caring and doing something about it are two different things.
Are they? You balanced a full-time job, raising a teenager, maintaining your marriage, and visiting your father multiple times a week for months. You advocated for him when you felt something was wrong. You brought him memories from home. You held on to hope for his recovery. What part of that isn't doing something about it?
The part where I wasn't there when he died.
Sarah, let me ask you something about your father. When you were growing up, if you had been studying for an important exam and he had a minor health issue, what would he have told you to do?
He would have told me to focus on my exam. He always said, take care of your responsibilities first.
And if he knew that you had been running yourself ragged for months, missing work, exhausting yourself, and someone suggested you take one evening to rest, what would he have said?
He would have insisted I take the break. He hated when I worried about him too much. He always said I was too good to him, that I needed to live my own life.
So the night he died, when you took the social worker's advice to have one peaceful evening with your family, you were actually doing exactly what your father would have wanted you to do.
But he died that night.
He died the night you finally listened to the voice he had raised in you, the voice that said, take care of yourself too. Sarah, what if your father's final gift to you was dying on a night when you were doing exactly what he taught you to do?
You think he planned it?
I think people who are dying often wait for the right moment. And the right moment for your father might have been when he knew you were finally taking care of yourself the way he always wanted you to.
But then why do I feel so guilty?
Because grief and guilt get tangled up in our brains. When someone we love dies, our mind searches for a reason, for someone to blame. And the easiest target is always ourselves, because that gives us the illusion that we had more control than we actually did.
Control over what?
Over death itself. If you can convince yourself that your father died because you weren't there, then you can also convince yourself that you could have prevented it by being there. It's terrifying to accept that some things are completely out of our control.
So I'm torturing myself because I can't accept that he was going to die no matter what I did.
You're torturing yourself because accepting powerlessness over death means accepting that love isn't always enough to save someone. And that's the hardest truth any of us ever has to learn.
He really was proud of me, wasn't he? That thing the nurse said, that wasn't just her being nice.
Sarah, people don't brag about disappointing children to strangers. Your father spent his last day telling people how good you were to him, not how absent you were, not how neglectful you were, how good you were.
Then why can't I believe that?
Because guilt is louder than love, but love lasts longer than guilt, if you let it. Sarah, I want you to imagine your father right now looking down at you, torturing yourself for the past year. What do you think he would say?
He'd probably be furious with me. Yeah. He never liked it when I was hard on myself about anything. He used to say, Sarah, you're your own worst enemy.
So the man who was proud enough to brag about you to nurses on his last day would be angry that you're calling yourself a terrible daughter?
When you put it like that, yeah, he'd hate this. He'd probably say something like, stop being ridiculous, kiddo. You did fine.
You did fine. Not you did everything perfectly. Not you never made a mistake. Just you did fine on mine. What would it mean to accept that?
It would mean accepting that I'm human, that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. That loving someone doesn't mean being perfect.
Sarah, your father didn't need you to be perfect. He needed you to be his daughter. And every time you visited, every time you brought him something from home, every time you advocated for him, you were being exactly that.
But I missed so many chances to show him I loved him.
Did you? When you chose not to visit on a Tuesday because you were exhausted, what were you protecting?
His health, I guess, but maybe I was protecting my own hope more than anything.
When you took that one evening for yourself, what were you protecting?
I don't know, my sanity? Or was I just being selfish because I was tired of watching him fade away?
Every single one of those decisions came from love, Sarah. Not perfect love, not selfless love, but real love. The kind of love that recognizes you can't pour from an empty cup.
So you're saying guilt comes from love?
I'm saying guilt this deep only comes from love this real. Think about it. Do you feel this guilty about strangers you couldn't help? Do you lose sleep over acquaintances you disappointed?
No, of course not.
Guilt is love with nowhere to go. When someone dies, we can't take care of them anymore. So our love turns inward and becomes self-punishment. But Sarah, what if instead of punishing yourself with that love, you honored your father's memory with it?
What do you mean?
Your father raised a daughter who cares so deeply that she would sacrifice her own peace for a year to punish herself for imaginary failures. That speaks to the kind of man he was, doesn't it?
He was the most caring person I knew. He would help anyone who needed it.
And he raised you to be the same way. The daughter who visited him multiple times a week while working full-time and raising a family. Where do you think that caring nature came from?
From him.
So every time you show kindness to someone, every time you go out of your way to help, every time you love imperfectly but completely, you're honoring everything he taught you. That's his real legacy, not whether you were in a room when he took his last breath.
I never thought about it that way.
Sarah, I want you to think about someone in your life right now who you love, your daughter, your husband, a friend.
Okay.
If they were going through what you're going through, if they were tearing themselves apart with guilt over not being perfect, when someone they loved died, what would you tell them?
I tell them they did their best, that they loved deeply, that the person who died wouldn't want them suffering like this.
So why are you not allowed the same compassion you would give to anyone else you love?
Because I don't know, because it feels like giving up on him somehow.
Sarah, forgiving yourself isn't giving up on your father. It's finally accepting the love he had for you. It's believing him when he said you were the best thing he ever did.
How do I do that? How do I stop feeling guilty?
You start by recognizing that the guilt itself is proof of everything beautiful about your relationship with him. Then you ask yourself, what would honor his memory more? You destroying yourself over imaginary failures, or you living the caring, imperfect, beautifully human life he raised you to live?
Living the life he raised me to live.
And Sarah, for everyone listening who's caring for someone right now, or who's lost someone they love, remember this. Guilt almost always comes from the people we love most, not the ones we neglect. If you're feeling guilty, it's probably because you care too much, not too little. That's not a character flaw. That's love trying to find a way to continue.
I think I'm ready to try forgiving myself.
Your father would be proud of that decision too. And if you're carrying guilt about someone you've lost or exhausting yourself caring for someone now, remember Sarah's story. That guilt you feel, it's proof you love them, not proof you failed them. Call someone you love today. Tell them what they mean to you. And if this helped you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.